The Houston Rockets just are not ready, and that's okay. They've run into a really good playoff tested team in the Golden State Warriors that are exposing by far their biggest weakness, Jalen Green, and more so what Jalen Green is and represents on this Houston roster. They do not have a primary perimeter creator that they can go to near the end of games. Yes, Van Fleet has had some big games. Even Jalen Green himself had a big game in this series against Golden State. But when it comes to finding consistent, reliable, good half-court offense, Houston just does not have that option. And when they brought in Jalen Green, when they drafted him second overall, just behind Cade Cunningham, ahead of Evan Mobley, that was the guy they thought they were getting. They thought long-term Jalen Green could turn into their Ja Morant. Even someone like Jamal Murray, like their version of that, that's what they thought they were getting with Jalen Green. Yes, people thought that someone like Jabari Smith had a lot of upside when they drafted him offensively that just hasn't developed. And yes, Şengün is really good, and Tari Eason's an unbelievable complementary player, and I think long-term, Amen Thompson's probably the most untouchable guy in the entire roster. But even with all of those guys, the guy that they thought was going to be their perimeter guy in this rebuild was Jalen Green, and he just hasn't become that. It's not necessarily a negative for him. It's more so just a function of where Houston is and how good they are already within this rebuild, winning 50 games in a tough Western Conference, how good they are defensively, that it's just especially glaring when the guy they've been waiting on to step up to be the guy just hasn't been. He's still just 23 years old. There's still a lot of room here to grow for Jalen Green, but I think it's becoming increasingly clear that Houston's patience level for him becoming the guy that they need is definitely shrinking. And the problem for Green, really, and the thing that gets exposed more so in the playoffs than it does in the regular season, is that he doesn't do anything great. He's not a great driver. He's not a great finisher at the rim. He's not a great mid-range player. He's not a great pull-up three-point shooter. He's not a great playmaker. There's nothing that before the game you pull up and you look at Jalen Green's scouting report and you're concerned about, you're worried about, you really are game planning against, to the point that it opens up other parts of his game. If he was an elite pull-up three-point shooter, that would change everything for Jalen Green on the level of something like what happened with Tyrese Maxey at times throughout his career, where all of a sudden teams were so concerned about him pulling up from three from all these different angles that he's able to use his speed and get to the rim and create. That just doesn't exist for Jalen Green. And I think that's really the biggest issue for Houston's roster as a whole, is that he hasn't developed into the guy that they need. Again, it's not even necessarily a referendum on who Jalen Green is. I'm not a huge fan of his, but like, he just turned 23 years old. There's still a lot of opportunity to grow, and his potential, movement throughout the league, going to a new team, then moving on, or whatever they might do with him, has more to do with how good Houston has become in such a short period of time since bringing in Ime Udoka than it does his lack of development. But that doesn't change the fact that he is a problem for this team, and the Warriors are exposing that. Which is interesting for two different reasons. One, this is just kind of what rebuilds look like when you don't get the main guy. As I mentioned earlier, when they drafted Jalen Green, they thought he was going to be their Cade Cunningham, their Jamal Murray, whoever that is for them, their perimeter guy that they give the ball to. Obviously, Murray's role is a little bit different, but they thought it was going to be at least something kind of on that level. He would develop into that guy. But they just haven't found that guy through this rebuild. I've already mentioned all the other guys, like they drafted Reed Shepard, who doesn't play. Cam Whitmore's got some potential. Tari Eason's a good complementary player. Jabari hasn't developed offensively, but he's a nice complementary player. Amen Thompson, who, like I said, probably has the highest ceiling on the entire team. Şengün is a really, really good front court player. All those guys were supposed to be complements to ultimately what they thought Jalen Green would become. And it just hasn't happened. And sometimes that's how it is. It's really difficult to find an all-NBA perimeter guy at the center of your team. As much as it seems like a bunch of teams have one of those guys, it's really difficult to find. It's much harder to find one of those guys than it is to find Tari Eason or Jabari Smith or even someone like Şengün. And so that's just kind of what it looks like. The other thing that's super interesting, though, is it's almost a compliment to what Houston has become over the last couple of seasons, that Jalen Green is their biggest problem. Like, Jalen Green not developing into who they need offensively, their lack of spacing, their lack of perimeter creation is their biggest problem, because they figured out so many other things with this roster. They're an unbelievable defensive team. They're one of the best rebounding teams in the league now that they've been playing Steven Adams and Şengün a bunch together. They're crazy athletic. They're great in transition. There's so many good things that they do. The problem is Jalen Green has just not developed to where they need him to be. If he had become, like, well, look what Cade Cunningham's doing with Detroit. If he had become that level of guy by now for Houston, we probably wouldn't be having Kevin Durant, Devin Booker conversations around this team in the offseason. We'd probably be like, you know what? They're going to be able to develop. Like, he's going to become, not SGA, but something close, something semi-close to what SGA has been for OKC. because they didn't have to go out and find the guy. Obviously, it was through a trade, but OKC got Jalen Williams, they got Chet, they added complementary guys in a way that Houston has added complementary guys because they had SGA as their focal point guy, and Jalen Green, unfortunately, just hasn't become that. And it definitely shows that there's levels to being a perimeter player between the regular season and the postseason. There's probably 90 guys, 100 guys that if you really wanted to could average 20 a game, 15 a game in the regular season in the NBA. The pace is so high, there's so many threes, guys are so talented offensively. Averaging 20 points a game in the regular season is not all that much of an accomplishment, but then once you get to the postseason and there's more physicality and the floor shrinks a little bit, teams are really locked in defensively, you start to see the difference between someone like I said, even like Jamal Murray or what Cade Cunningham has been for Detroit and where Jalen Green is right now. And for Houston, ultimately that's going to likely lead to them finding that guy via trade and Jalen Green being involved in the trade. Now, I feel like at this point in the video, there's going to be some people and Rockets fans specifically saying, well, we have other guys, like we have Şengün, we have Amen Thompson, like we don't really need to move on from someone like Jalen Green because those guys are going to develop, and I hear you, but in Şengün's case, I really like Şengün. I think he's awesome. It's just very difficult to build your postseason offense around a big that isn't overwhelmingly physical in the post and or isn't an elite passer on the level of someone like Jokic. Like those kinds of guys are much more difficult to find because it's harder to get the ball to a guy in the post. It's harder for them to be dominant because teams can game plan more against it. It's easier to double in the post. There's all these different things you can do compared to a guy that's got great three-point range off the dribble and pick and rolls. They can get to the rim anytime he wants. They can play make anytime he wants. It's just different. And as much as I like Şengün, I don't think he's the solution to their Jalen Green problem. And ultimately, this is leading to Jalen Green for Devin Booker, Jalen Green for Kevin Durant, maybe even some Giannis stuff for Houston, because again, he's just not where they need him to be. And again, I think that just shows how great this Houston team has become really this year because they still can put together unbelievable stretches. Like you don't win 50 games in this Western Conference by accident. They're incredible in transition. They can score off turnovers. Their half-court offense just isn't there, as evidenced by even in a game where Fred VanVleet loses his mind and hits a ton of threes, they're still just barely getting over 100 points in a playoff game. Like they just do not have consistent, reliable perimeter offense like they thought that they would when they got Jalen Green. And it's not even to say that he'll never be that guy. Like there's a realistic possibility that in 4 years, Jalen Green is the guy that Houston needs right now, that he has developed enough as a three-point shooter, as a driver, as a creator. And I think should he become available via trade, whether it be for Devin Booker or whoever else, there's going to be plenty of teams interested in the upside that he brings, in addition to the fact that now Houston went ahead and got him on this new contract, so they don't have to worry about renegotiating that deal either. I think there's going to be a level of interest in Jalen Green, but there's so many perimeter guys like this throughout the league that just are not on the SGA, Cade Cunningham, like these guys kind of level. And unfortunately, Jalen Green isn't there now, and Houston needs him to be there now. They can't wait 4 years for Jalen Green to develop into that player. They need a Devin Booker, they need a Kevin Durant, they need a Giannis, they need somebody at the center of this team that they know can create really good half-court offense for them almost every single time down the floor. And unfortunately, that's just not Jalen Green right now. It could be in 4 years, but the Rockets have accelerated things so much with bringing in Ime Udoka, with bringing in the veterans like VanVleet and Dillon Brooks, to the point where they're a really good basketball team with one glaring flaw. And frankly, the Warriors probably exposed that flaw more than most other teams because they're a really smart team. They've been pretty good defensively since they added Jimmy Butler, and they know where your weaknesses are. Like, they're not going to go throughout a series without finding this is what you struggle with, and they're going to force Jalen Green into a bunch of turnovers. They're going to basically force him off the floor and say, okay, it's going to be VanVleet. That's going to be your creator. Şengün's going to shoot the ball 30 times a game. They're going to take Jalen Green out of the basketball game because they understand that there's nothing that they need to be worried about. He has no elite skills yet, and unfortunately, that's just become a massive issue for the Rockets and one that they can't ignore anymore. And I'd like to think that in the long term, Jalen Green will become something kind of resembling what Houston needs currently. It just more than likely won't be on this roster. I could be wrong. They could be way more patient than I realized. They've got him and Şengün on new contracts. Jabari needs a new deal. They've got Amen Thompson, obviously just his second year in the league. They've got other guys on this roster that they really, really like. And maybe they realize, hey, we can develop this. We can be the next OKC. We can just wait on our guys to become who we need. I just don't think that's realistic to expect if you're a Rockets fan, if you're the Rockets yourselves, because you have such an unbelievable core right now, and it's going to be really expensive to retain that core in the long term, which ultimately, as I said, is probably leading to a Jalen Green trade for somebody this offseason, because that's really the only way that in a reasonable timeline, they're going to solve their Jalen Green problem.